All right, you want to just start with the nigun? Please rise. Page 4.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav V'tzivanu lehadlik ner V'tzivanu lehadlik ner V'tzivanu lehadlik ner Shel Shabbat Amen.
And you may be seated now as we continue. Page 5, Shalom Aleichem, Malchei Hasharet.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem leShalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu. Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Zeichem leShalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Let us go and sing to Adonai, and let us trumpet praises to our protector. Lechuna Radana Ladonai, page 11.
Lechuna Radana, Lechuna Radana, Lechuna Radana Ladonai. Lechuna Radana, Lechuna Radana, Lechuna Radana Ladonai. Naria לצור אישנו, לקדמה בנה ותודה. נריה לצור אישנו, בזמירות נריה לו. לכו נרננה, לכו נרננה, לכו נרננה לאדוני. לכו נרננה, לכו נרננה, לכו נרננה לאדוני.
Yismachu Hashemayim v'tagel haaretz, page 14.
Yismachu Hashemayim ישמחו השמיים, ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ, ישמחו השמיים, השמיים, ישמחו השמיים, השמיים, ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ, ירם בים, ירם בים, ירם בים, לא, ירם בים, ירם ים, ירם ים, לא, ישמחו השמיים, ישמחו השמיים, ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ, ירם ים, ירם ים, ירם ים, לא, ירם ים, ירם ים, ירם ים,
And now let us welcome the Sabbath bride with the words of Lacha Dodi Likrat Kala, page 23.
Lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabala. Lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabala. Shamor v'zachor b'ribud echad, hishmi'anu el hamiuchad. Adonai echad l'shmo v'echad l'shemo tiferet, v'litila, v'litila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabala. Lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabala. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה. מראש מכרם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה. תחילה לך דודי, לקראת, we rise and face the door. נקבלה לך דודי, לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום מתנת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצורה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
You may be seated. No, Tov. Yeah, okay. Now we'll do Tov Lehodot from the Psalm for the Sabbath day.
טוב, טוב, טוב להודות, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר, ולזמר, ולזמר לשמך עליון. טוב, טוב, טוב להודות, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר, ולזמר,
now we welcome into our congregation those who are mourning and those observing a yard site. We will now recite the Mourner's Kaddish on page 30. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah v'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'izman kariv yemru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam le'almei almaya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yit par v'yit ramam v'yit naseh v'yit hadar v'yit aleh v'yit halal Shemei dekudsha berechu. Leila min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran v'yalma v'yemru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yemru amen. Osei shalom bimramav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yemru amen. Now we ask everyone to rise for Barg, page 39.
Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
You may be seated. We continue with Ahavat Olam, page 40.
Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael, Beit Yisrael, Amchavta Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadta, Al ken Adonai Eloheinu, V'shochveinu v'kolveinu, Nasiach b'chukecha. Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael, Amchavta Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadta, V'nismach v'nivrei Toratecha, U'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Yehei mechayenu me'orech yameinu, U'mahem nege yomam v'layla. Ve'ahavatcha, ve'ahavadecha, Al tasir v'imenu le'olamim. Baruch Adonai Ohei Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha, v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'beitecha u'v'nechlecha v'derech, u'v'shochbecha u'v'kumecha, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
We continue silently in Hebrew or English to the bottom of page 42.
Adonai Elohechem Emet.
And now the song our ancestors sang when they crossed the Red Sea and were free at last from Egyptian slavery, the sign that God was with us and he has been with us for thousands of years. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, who is like you, God amongst the mighty, page 44.
באים אדוני, כמוך נהדר בקודש נורא נורא, נורא תהילות עושי פלא. מי כמוך באים אדוני, כמוך נהדר בקודש נורא נורא, נורא תהילות עושי פלא. מלכותך ראו בניך, חוקי הים לפני משה. זני, זני, ענו ויאמרו, מלכותך ראו בניך, חוקי הים לפני משה. זני, זני, ענו ויאמרו.
Help us, Adonai, our God, to lie down peacefully tonight and awaken us again tomorrow to life renewed. Hashkivenu, page 45.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom Ve'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom Ve'hamidenu malkeinu. Page 46, we join in the Shamru. The Shamru, Israel et Shabbat, לעשות את השבת, לדורותם בברית עולם. The Shamru, Israel et Shabbat, לעשות את השבת. אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, ושמרו ישראל את השבת, לעשות השבת לדורותם בריבונם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו ישראל את השבת, לעשות השבת לדורותם בריבונם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות השבת לדורותם בריבונם. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם כל עלמי עלמיה, יתברך, ישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי לקודשה ויזכור לעילם מכל מפלסה, ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה, באמירות בעלמא ואמרו אמן, ואמרו אמן, ואמרו אמן, ואמרו אמן, אמן.
The silent Amidah, page 47 through page 52.
page 51. Shalom Rav el Yisrael Acha, Tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav el Yisrael Acha, Tasim le'olam. Ki ata Shalom Rav Yisrael Acha, Tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Acha, Tasim le'olam. V'tov einecha levarich et amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Acha, Tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Acha, Tasim le'olam. Baruch atah Adonai hamevarech et amo arms around each other, let's join in. Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom Imromah. Uya Oseh Shalom Aleinu. Shalom Aleinu. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru. Shalom bimromah, Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Shalom Aleinu, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru, Amen. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru, Amen.
We prayed for peace, and now let us pray for those who are ill in our families and in our community as the cantor recites the Misha Barg prayer found in the inside back cover of our Sidurim.
Misha Barg avotenu kor habracha. Source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing for us and all of those we love. Bless those in need of healing with refuah Shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say,
You may be seated. I have to say, it's the first time, I think, since we've been back that I hear the voices, the singing, and it's so nice. It really is. There were many Friday nights where it was the two of us and Jared and David. I mean, you guys sing much better than I do. Beautiful. Well, don't go that far. Let's continue now with the Kaddish Shalem, page 54.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חילותי וימליך מלכותי, וחייכון ומיכון וחייכו בית ישראל, בעגלה בזמן קריב, אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך, וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומה ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל, שמי נגונשה, בריחו. לעילם כל בחדה בשירתה, ושבחתה ונחמתה לאמירן בעלמא, ואמרו אמן. יתקבל צלותנו וברוכנו לכל ישראל, קודם אבוני בשמיה, ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו על כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו amen.
So thank God for the past week, a ceasefire is holding between Israel and the terrorist organization that controls Gaza. But it's still on our minds. What really happened? Why did this start? What was life like for Israelis under the constant barrage of terrorist rockets, living in whatever part of Israel they were? We see it in the news, some positive light on Israel and some negative coverage of Israel. But tonight, we thought to really enlighten us and to learn more of what happened and what the future may hold. My colleague, Rabbi Fort, had an opportunity this week to speak with a conservative rabbi who lives in Israel. His name is Rabbi Joe Schwartz. Some of you know the name of the conservative movement in Israel is called the Masorti movement, which means traditional movement. It's a growing movement of conservative-type shuls that can be found throughout the state of Israel. And Rabbi Joe Schwartz is a rabbi, American-born rabbi who made Aliyah and now calls his home Israel. What were these last few weeks like for him and his family, as a father and husband, as a rabbi, as an Israeli? So I invite you now to enjoy and learn from the conversation Rabbi Ford had with Rabbi Schwartz earlier this week.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Sarah.
Welcome to you, and welcome to everybody who's joining us, whether you're in person in the Barg Sanctuary or whether you are joining us virtually online. It's wonderful to have you be meeting my former fellow classmate and colleague, and at the very least, Facebook friends, Rabbi Joe Schwartz. And I remember Joe from class, whenever we had some kind of like a philosophy class or something together, or halacha, and I just remember being really excited anytime that you talked because I knew it was going to be interesting. There's a lot of voices vying at each other during rabbinical school, and I was always happy to have yours specifically.
Thanks, Sarah.
Joe is a rabbi, conservative rabbi. He was a conservative rabbi in America, working in New York, and then he and his wife and 2 children made Aliyah around August of last year, which was really interesting timing, I'm sure. So, Joe, you have been living in Tel Aviv since,
That's right.
especially specifically during this most recent conflict, and of course, now too. And I know from my own experience of living in Israel during these kinds of conflicts, before being there and living there and having that experience, is very different from being, Chutz La'aretz, living outside of Israel and looking in. And so I would just like to hear, and I think everyone would like to hear about your own personal experience, your family's experience of living in Israel as American Olim, people who made Aliyah, and also conservative Jews living in Israel during this latest conflict and now.
Thanks. Well, really, it's a pleasure. I'm so glad you reached out to me to speak with you and speak with your community. It's a real honor. I want to start by saying life here in Israel and in Tel Aviv is absolutely wonderful. It's a great place to live. It's a wonderful place particularly for a young family like ours. There are tons of children, tons of playgrounds, and we're very happy to have made this move. We moved really because my son in particular was having a hard time during the COVID restrictions in Brooklyn where we were living. And we wanted to make sure that he was in school and with classmates. And he's just come alive here in a way that he never has before. That's true even though this last round of this flare-up of this ongoing conflict with Hamas in Gaza was scary. We had moved into our apartment here in North Tel Aviv, and as you know, Sarah, you mentioned to me beforehand, new apartments, fancy apartments that we're fortunate to live in, have a designated safe room in the house called in Hebrew a mamad, which is sort of a reinforced safe room, double thick walls, double thick glass, sprinkler system. That is my son's bedroom. And he never asked why was the door so thick to his room? Why are the glass? He never thought to ask. We were out to actually go see a concert one night, and we'd been checking the news. This last flare-up really began with conflicts in Jerusalem. But Jerusalem is a different world to Tel Aviv, and it had nothing to do with us. And at the last minute, we saw that it looked as though Hamas was going to be firing missiles on Tel Aviv. And we quickly came home in a taxi from this concert we were going to go to. And the moment we got out of the taxi, air raid sirens started to go off all around the city. We had heard these sirens before because they blast on Holocaust Remembrance Day and on Memorial Day. But this was my first time hearing them announcing what they're meant to announce, really, which is incoming missiles. We ran upstairs. The babysitter had already taken both children into the mamad, into the shelter. And we shut the double thick door, we shut the window, and we tried to remain very calm so as not to frighten the kids. And then overhead, we heard a series of bangs. And what we were hearing was the Iron Dome system intercepting missiles. I believe this is the largest barrage of missiles ever fired on Tel Aviv in the history of the city. From what we heard, a lot of them were really overhead. And thank God for the Iron Dome system, which worked very, very well. These barrages went on for a while, not as heavy as on the first 2 days. The first 2 days was much heavier than the rest of the time. My son, who's 7, and my daughter, who's 4, both slept in his room so that we wouldn't have to wake them if there was a siren. They so enjoyed sleeping with one another. Normally we separate them because they play too much and they keep each other awake. But now they got to sleep together, and they learned that it was Hamas that was firing on us. So they kept on saying to one another, "Toda Hamas," thank you Hamas, because all they understood was that they got to sleep together for a week, which made them very happy. It was a scary time for us, much more than for the kids. Kids are amazingly adaptable, and they got used to the routine. It was just dreary and boring for them because school was canceled. We didn't sleep that well because a lot of the barrages came at night. And then after about 10 days, a ceasefire was reached with Hamas. The missiles stopped. The kids went back to school. And most extraordinarily, and this is a thing about Israel which is just simply amazing, is the moment the danger passed, and even frankly, while the danger was still alive, people were out and about and living their lives. Particularly Tel Aviv is like a cafe culture city. People love hanging out in sidewalk cafes. And people were undeterred. They were out having the time of their lives and then taking shelter when they had to. So now it's been, about a full week since the kids have been back in school. And most of our friends here, perhaps all of them, have shrugged it off, at least as a matter of threat, mortal threat. There's political consequences to what's happening that people are concerned about, and we can discuss if you want to. But in terms of the feeling of everyday life here, things have gone back to normal. The sky is blue. It's getting hot. People are going to the beach every day. Life is back to normal.
That's I feel like we heard a lot about the rockets and the Iron Dome. I remember going to day school last week and talking to the kids about the Iron Dome and what it was and how amazing it is. It's life changing. It's life saving. And for you, as an American Jew who is also an Israeli Jew now, and with your family that are American and Israeli, what was it like, not just thinking about and worrying about the threat from above, but the unrest that was happening on the ground, which...
Yeah. So I'm not sure everyone's aware of this. Really, two things happened that were newsworthy during this time. The first was the missiles fired at us from Gaza, and then, of course, the reprisals by the IDF going into firing into Gaza to try to knock out the missile silos and degrade the military capacity of Hamas. That's a known event. That's been happening in Israel since 2006, 2007, when Hamas first came to power. It doesn't make it any better, but it makes it familiar. At the same time, what was very, very troubling was in poor cities, which have both an Arab and a Jewish population, riots broke out. First in Lod, which is where Ben Gurion Airport is, and then in Ramleh and in Akko, and even in Haifa, which is known for a sort of peaceful coexistence. The story there is more complicated. It looks as though the riots began by Arabs against Jewish neighbors and in particular and synagogues as well. In Lod, in particular, several synagogues were set on fire. But there were reprisal attacks shortly thereafter, particularly just south of us in Bat Yam, where Jewish, all of this is young, not very well-to-do men going out at night without supervision, going out looking for trouble. In Bat Yam, there were mobs of Jews looking for Arabs to beat up, and there have been riots going back and forth that remind me a little bit of if anyone saw the movie Gandhi. It's not on this scale, but in Calcutta, before there was partition between Pakistan and India, there were a series of sectarian riots between Muslims and Hindus there. And that was obviously a much, much greater scale, but a similar tension in the context of war, having two different ethnic groups living side by side, erupting into conflict as well. That has shaken Israel tremendously. That has unsettled us. That's an unknown thing here. Israeli Arabs, or Palestinians, depending on how you the word you want to use, tend to live quite peacefully with Jews. And there's been tremendous gains in Israel over the past 2 decades of integration of the Arab minority into mainstream Israeli society. All of our pharmacists, for example, are Arab. Most of the nurses, when we go to the mirpa'ah, the clinic, are Arab. There's a high degree of trust and integration. And this feeling that your neighbor might attack you because he's Arab and you're a Jew has really unsettled people tremendously. And that's where a lot of the attention has gone.
I can't imagine having been there and have that stress. You're like, oh, this stress is familiar. This I know. This anxiety, but that is a whole new concern to have. I wonder, and I feel like you're uniquely positioned to be thinking about this. And I know you write a lot about this, which is one of the other reasons why I reached out to you, because I read what you write and it's fascinating. And you have very smart friends who comment on it, so it's always fun. I'm one of your many lurkers. Not anymore, I guess. You're an American and an Israeli, and you're a father, and you're a husband, and you're a rabbi. You're a conservative rabbi, maybe. Are you a Masorti rabbi now? Does that count? You count now as a Masorti? So
I haven't. Let's say yes. Why not?
You identify as Masorti, and which is cool. And I feel like you're uniquely positioned to observe the kind of place of Israel in the media, specifically in America, though also globally. And I was kind of just wondering, what are your thoughts on how Israel has been portrayed in all sorts of media?
Yeah. Well, so that, Sarah, that's been the part that's been the most dismaying to me. I mean, I was unused to being fired upon by missiles, and as an Israeli, I'm concerned about the social fabric, and so those riots concern me. But I still have more than one eye trained on America. I haven't completely sort of taken leave, and I've been reading the news and reading social media and watching videos that are traded, that go around. And what I've seen this time is something that's been growing for a long time. The kind of transformation of Israel from David to Goliath, let's say, from the underdog who everyone rallied for in the 1967 war, let's say. And over the last half century, by degrees, it's come to be seen as a sort of a behemoth. Now I think it's swelled to proportions that make the state that I know and the society I know unrecognizable. Israel is portrayed in almost all elite media. There are obviously exceptions for certain outlets, Jewish outlets, conservative outlets, but the kind of prestige media outlets, Israel is portrayed as a kind of a demonic figure. I think more than the coverage in the New York Times, what really, really disturbed me was John Oliver. I was trying to think about why. I don't know if everybody there is aware of what happened. Probably, right? But both Trevor Noah, who took over The Daily Show, and John Oliver, who has a new show very much in that same format, we don't really have Walter Cronkites like, the Greatest Generation did. We don't have figures who we just trust implicitly. But we do have these comedians, and even though the comedians are more identified with one side of the political spectrum than other, there's something beloved about them. They're warm, they're fuzzy, and you can usually trust them to be a voice of conscience to some degree. John Oliver in particular, who I have great affection for, was absolutely vicious, I think, toward Israel in his opening monologue, and cursed at Israel, accused Israel of committing war crimes, this while the conflict was still happening, accused Israel of being an apartheid state. It was an unrelenting assault of language that has been developing on the left side of the spectrum for a while, but hadn't been mainstreamed until this moment. And I had a feeling that he could only do such a thing if he had the backing of a large group of people that wouldn't protest. That is, he was voicing a mainstream view, or a view that had in short order become mainstream. And so both his doing it and what that meant about the environment that he was emerging from, both of those things tremendously disturbed me. And I remain very unsettled. I'm a little, you don't know how I look when I have had a lot of sleep, but I'm a little sleepless, partly because I really, really am shaken by this. And of course, as everyone knows, but not just that, but after the sort of media onslaught, it spilled out into the streets. First, it spilled out into the streets in the capitals of Europe, in Brussels and in German cities and in London, with horrific scenes of people driving through specifically Jewish neighborhoods, chanting horrible things. Not, of course, about Israel or, the conduct of the IDF, but about Jews. And then it spilled out into Los Angeles and into New York City, where I was born and raised. And you have scenes of people beating up Jews on the street, firing on the Diamond District of New York City, explosive devices at people. Unthinkable if that could happen in America. So, I began by reassuring everybody that life here is wonderful and comfortable and gone back to normal. I don't mean to be anything less than completely sympathetic for the fact that that's not the way things feel over there. And, I was thinking of kind of paraphrasing Yehuda Halevi, I am in the West, but my heart is in the East with you. The other way around. I'm in the East, my heart is in the West. It really, really breaks my heart to see what's happening there and frightens me for the American Jewish community.
So how, you are of the American Jewish community, now you're in the Israeli Jewish community, the Israel community. How do we, who live Chutz La'aretz, who live in America, for example, feel strong and confident and comfortable in our Jewishness
Yeah.
or our Zionism?
So there are two pieces to a kind of an onslaught like this. Let's go back to John Oliver for a second. John Oliver is both staring at you through the screen and saying that you're his enemy, and he's saying that you're morally bad. And I think you want to separate those two things. You want to say, on the one hand, I hear you telling me that I am morally bad, but I'm a moral agent, and I'm free to evaluate that claim by myself, and I can do my own research into, for example, whether or not Israel is guilty of war crimes. That is an empirical claim that I can research myself and come to a view about. And I don't think anyone needs to, bend over to accept when somebody tells them that they're bad. I also want to remind Jews sort of around the world that when people come for us, they come for us telling us that we're bad. The first time they did it, they came at us saying that we killed their God, right? And after that, that we were a foreign race that was corrupting their societies. And now they're saying that we are this great obstacle to world peace and the #1 human rights abuser in the world. In every case, the argument comes at us, not just that we're an enemy, but that we're evil. I say, don't listen to them. Just don't listen to them. That's #1. #2, they're coming at you as an enemy, right? Someone that they really want to hurt. Now, John Oliver's not trying to punch you, but there are people on the streets that were coming at you as an enemy. And there, I think it's important to recognize that the world that we live in now is not the same world that Jews lived in for 2,000 years. This is a world with a Jewish state where half the Jewish people, or more, perhaps more, about half the Jewish people are citizens of that state, and they're strong and they're proud and they're unbowed. And you can, American Jews can, diaspora Jews can draft off that sense of strength, I think. You don't need to bow and to cow and to be afraid anymore. And here, actually, there's a bit of Torah, because the phrase that gets repeated most in the Torah, of all phrases, is do not be afraid. That's the phrase which in various different phrases is repeated again and again and again. And first Moses and then his disciple Joshua says again and again to the people, chazak ve'amatz, which means be strong, chazak ve'amatz, and have a sense of self-possession, I might say, about that. Be strong and also be brave at the same time. And I think we need that when there's a moment like this erupting, not to feel intimidated. That doesn't mean not to take precautions for a physical safety. Definitely take precautions, but don't allow them to persuade you that you're bad and evil, and don't allow them to make you think that they can really get to you. Neither is going to happen right now.
Well, that was good amount of physics. I feel slightly better already. We have such a short amount of time, and I just want to thank you so much, Joe, for joining us. And I hope, we're pre-recording this, so it's not Shabbat yet, but by the time we watch this, you would have been in Shabbat for several hours, and I hope that you will have an absolutely wonderful, wonderful Shabbat. Only peace and health and safety and blessings for you, for your wife, for your two beautiful and extremely photogenic children. I've seen so many pictures after your wife, I can tell. And thank you so much, Joe, for joining us.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom to you and to your community.
Thank you, Rabbi Fort, for sharing the interview with us. And thank you, Rabbi Schwartz, all the way from Israel. And I love what he said. Hazak v'hamatz. Let us be strong, let us be brave, and let us pray for the day when Israelis no longer need safe rooms in all of their homes and apartments, that we pray eventually shalom will reign. Now let us continue in our service. We rise for the Aleinu, page 56.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם, אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומשב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אלוהינו, אמת מלכנו אפס ולעזור, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. ונאמר אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
And now we invite all those in mourning and all those in mourning and all those with the yurtsite in just a moment. There we go. Now all those in mourning, all those observing a yurtsite, to remain standing for the words of the mourner's Kaddish. And this week at Beth Yeshurun, we offer condolences to the families of Fillmore Cohen, Pearl Levine, Roberta Sussman, Rosemary DeVito. Page 58. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah, v'yalma divrach yiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayeh dekol beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kariv v'yemru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach leolam omei amaya. Yitzbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudusha b'richu. Le'ela min kol berkata v'shirata, tishbechata v'nechemata, da'amiram v'yama v'yemru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'yemru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'yemru amen. And you may be seated. Tonight we have 6 anniversaries to celebrate. First, celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary, Debbie Kerner and Ron Brunfeld. Happy anniversary. And this past year has been a happy and healthy one. You were thankful to have been vaccinated and were able to visit the Jewish homeland of Florida. And you're also celebrating your granddaughter's high school graduation and her plans to enter college next year. And she's going to the University of Maryland, I believe. It's a happy 5th anniversary and only blessings, Debbie and Ron. Mazel tov. Celebrating their 14th wedding anniversary, Hillary and Ronnie Most. And this year, Ronnie, you became the managing partner of the Kahana Felds, Texas office. And more importantly, you spent the COVID year watching your 4 children play softball and baseball. You got to cheer each of them on while they were playing their hearts out, and each of them became champions of the respective leagues. And I know the 2 of you are very proud parents of 4 wonderful children. And may you only know blessings and more blessings as you celebrate tonight 14 years of marriage. Mazel tov. Happy anniversary. Watching us online this evening and celebrating their 18th wedding anniversary, Melissa and Andrew Brahms. And Melissa and Andrew, you're very happy that your anniversary fell on a very special weekend. As tomorrow afternoon, we'll be celebrating your twins, Benot Mitzvah, Abby and Emily. And we look forward to being with you tomorrow evening as we celebrate this wonderful milestone in your life. Celebrating their 28th wedding anniversary, Wendy and Danny Gold. Mazel tov. Wendy and Danny, everyone in your family, your 3 children, Jeffrey, Scott, and Stephanie, were together last week when Scott graduated from the UT in Austin with his Bachelor's of Business Administration and Finance and the Business Honors Program. Only continued blessings for your children and for the 2 of you as you celebrate 28 years of marriage. Mazel tov. Happy anniversary. Watching online this evening and celebrating their 37th wedding anniversary, Lauren and Jordan Mintz. Lauren and Jordan, your biggest simcha this past year, other than the obvious one of being healthy, was the birth of your 2nd grandchild on March 21st, Franklin or Frankie Maury Mintz. And his Hebrew name is Moshe. And only continued blessings for the 2 of you and your growing family as you celebrate 37 years of marriage. Happy anniversary, Lauren and Jordan. And tonight, celebrating 59 years of marriage, Sandy and Joe Kirk. Mazel tov. And during this past year, your children, Michael and Jessica, finalized the adoption of Sammy, your new 3-year-old grandson. And also your granddaughter, Samantha, completed her 2nd year of SMU Law School, and your grandson, Dylan, just graduated from the University of Texas this past weekend. And both of them are products of Beth Yeshurun Day School, and that's why they're doing so well. You're very blessed, your family, your children, your grandchildren, only blessings. It's great to see the 2 of you this evening. You look wonderful. You look like you're 59. Especially you, Sandy. Mazel tov on 59 years of marriage. Great to have all of you with us this evening as we celebrate a lot tonight. Just a few announcements I wanted to share with you. Of course, this is Memorial Day weekend. And this Sunday at 6 p.m., we'll be joining Jewish communities throughout the country and the Jewish Chaplains Council and the JCC Association of America. They'll be presenting the National Jewish Community Observance of Memorial Day. Military chaplains, Jewish military chaplains, and leaders of the American Jewish community will offer words of prayer and support, as well as a commitment to ever honor the memories of Gold Star families' loved ones. You can find information on our website. That's this Sunday at 6 p.m. I'm very excited to let you know it's been a dream of ours for many, many years to be able to send Beth Yeshurun teens as representatives of our congregation to Israel. Through Kehillah High School, in just a few weeks, on June 13th, we'll be sending 13 Beth Yeshurun teens to Israel for a 3.5-week trip to the Eretz Yisrael. And we're excited to welcome those teens and their families 2 weeks from tonight on June 11th to come up to the Bima, and we bless them as they join with 35 teens from 8 congregations in this new, if you will, Houston pilgrimage trip. But this time it's our Kehillah High School trip. It's the first time they're going to Israel. What a great time to go to Israel. Last summer, all of our teens were stuck at home, so I know these parents are very excited to get rid of their teens for the summer, and especially to send them to Israel. And so we look forward to having those teens join us 2 weeks from tonight. Next Sunday, June 16th, we'll have our summer kickoff drive. And from your car, you'll be able to pick up goodies and swag to kick off your summer fun, enjoy some tasty frozen treats, and say hi to your Beth Yeshurun clergy and staff. And that will be next Sunday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And with that, we're ready to bring our service to a close. Please join us in the lobby afterwards, in the atrium lobby afterwards, to join your clergy and leadership as we wish you a good Shabbos. And for all of our sons that are with us in person or online, we say to you, Yisimcha Elohim ke'Ephraim ke'Menashe. May God bless you like Ephraim and Menashe, and all the good girls of our tradition. And for our daughters that are with us and granddaughters, we say Yisimech Elohim ke'Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. May God bless you like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and all the wonderful daughters of our tradition. And may God bless all of our children with shalom, with peace always. And let us say, Amen. Please now rise for the Kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, orei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, Shabbat kodsho b'yahava u'v'ratzon, inchilanu, זיכרון למעשה בראשית, כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת, ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, בשבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. שבת שלום, שבת שלום, שבת 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 שלום, שבת שלום, שבת שלום, שבת 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 שלום, שבת 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 שלום, שבת 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 שלום, שבת שלום, שבת שלום, שבת 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 שלום, שבת שלום, שבת שלום, שבת 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 שלום.